All right, so our topic today is focusing on audits and inspections, and particularly around the documentation that we need to put together around these audits. And you ask the question always, why do I want to find out what I'm doing wrong? Why do I want to do an audit? It's just going to cause me more work. A lot of us may have seen the announcement for this webinar and said, I'll maybe not do that one because I don't want to know what my problems are. The reality is we need to know what our problems are. The only way we can fix those things, the only way that we can get better is if we take a good look at our own performance and really have a hard conversation with ourselves and say, what are we doing well? What are we not doing so well? And where do we need to go? And what do we need to do in the future to make sure that we're performing better? We'll also talk about documentation and the importance of documentation and some of the pitfalls and hazards of documentation that can also affect us in that. So we want to go into this with our eyes open. All right, so we ask ourselves, why do we audit? Sometimes auditing is a legal requirement. Under many OSHA standards, they have a requirement in there to do an annual program review. So for example, respiratory protection, if you use respirators, there's a legal requirement that you do an annual review of your program. What do I have to document on there? Well, it could be as simple as putting a revision date on your policy each year that says, I went in there and looked at it. Probably a little better than that would be to have some notes. Here are some things that we did. And, if you can put in there a revision history, that's good, or that's really good because you can show what you did, and that over time we're getting better. But sometimes it's a legal requirement. Sometimes it's just to identify hazards, and that's probably why a lot of you came here today is looking at a safety audit. How do we identify those hazards and prevent those from hurting somebody? Sometimes it's identifying nonconformities. Hey, we're not meeting a legal requirement. We're not meeting a standard that's out there, an industry standard. Or maybe it's something that the trust throws out, and we say, here's something that this is the best practice, and you look at how you're doing whatever it is, and say, we're not quite where the industry is, so let's fix this nonconformity that we have. Audits and inspections are an awesome opportunity for us to train our staff, because if we go out and say, here are the things that you need to look for in doing an audit, well, we're training them on the things that they need to look for every day. And if there's a problem, hopefully they're going to remember, oh yeah, I remember that garbage can shouldn't be in front of the eye wash station, because if I get something bad in my eyes, I'm going to trip over the garbage can trying to get to the eye wash station. So simple things like that can train all of our staff and help them be better risk managers and improve our safety culture where we work. The number one reason we do this is prevent accidents, to keep people from getting hurt and prevent us from having big financial losses as well. And so these audits cover the entire part of all of our operation. I didn't want to say audit as well now, because I know a lot of you are going through financial audits right now, and audit is a four-letter word. So what causes accidents? So when we look at our overall goal is preventing accidents, we ask ourselves, what causes accidents? Reality, accidents are caused, and they're caused by a couple of different things: unsafe conditions and unsafe acts. If there is a hypodermic needle left open on a table, that is a hazard. It's an unsafe condition. If somebody puts their hand down on it and they get a needle stick, that's a really bad thing. It creeps me out to even think about that. It took an unsafe act to develop that unsafe condition, but there could be things like, I climbed to the very top step of the ladder. That's an unsafe act. As I'm auditing and looking around, I want to look for the things that people are doing. It's not just a condition that can cause that accident. It's an act. It's somebody making a conscious decision or an unconscious decision to do something that puts them or someone else in jeopardy. But we believe that accidents can be prevented by eliminating these causes. If we prevent the unsafe or correct an unsafe condition or an unsafe act, and go the extra mile in the unsafe act, and let people know, hey, here's why you shouldn't walk on that top or climb to that top step of the ladder. It's because your center of gravity is in a bad spot, and you can easily tip that ladder over and be seriously injured. By eliminating these causes, we prevent the accidents. But if we don't eliminate those causes, they're still out there, and they will recur over and over again. And one thing that we've learned over and over is that if we don't learn from our mistakes, they're going to happen again. And as we look at claims come in, we don't see, very, very seldom do we see a claim description come in. Do we go, wow, never seen that one before? Most of the time, it's the same thing. And as Doug talks about those slips and falls, he went in and did a review of slips and falls, and he saw the same thing over and over again. Slips and falls in the parking lot, getting in and out of vehicles. They're things that we can work on. So let's make a commitment to go out and audit and find what those problems are and fix them. Here's one I'll just throw in here. This is kind of on the back burner right now. But a few years ago, the Assistant Secretary for Federal OSHA said that OSHA's highest priority was to push through legislation or rulemaking that would require employees to put an injury and illness prevention program in place that would help them find and fix hazards in their workplace. That was the number one priority. Now, we have a different presidential administration right now, and so the number one priority has probably got put on the back burner. But let me tell you, this is something that OSHA, both at the federal and the state level, thinks is really important, that we're actively identifying these hazards and fixing those things. Okay. So just as we dive into this, we talk about audits and we want to build a plan of what to audit. And we have to ask ourselves a question to start with. What do I want to find out? And so the answer to that question could be a lot of different things. I want to find out if I am OSHA compliant. If OSHA shows up tomorrow, which is something that happened to a number of cities last week, they had OSHA show up, and it was an unannounced visit, and it was quickly, oh no, are we in good shape? Luckily, those inspections worked out pretty well, but some of you would like to have that peace of mind knowing, okay, we've got our stuff in place, or I just want to know where I have any deficiencies, so then I can start working on those. Okay, so what do I want to find out? It may be something. It may be something else. It could be an employment-based question that I have. It could be a risk management thing. Do we have adequate coverage? Do we deal appropriately in contracts when we engage with something? Do we ensure that those contractors that are working for us have adequate coverage, and that we have protection there from a certificate of insurance? That's something that you can audit and see how well you're doing. We also have to ask, what are our standards? What am I being compared to? We'll go into those a little bit more. What is the scope of this audit? Sometimes it's just simply, I want to make sure that all of my employees are safe in their work every day before they start. And so that scope might be startup checklist. It might be a pre-trip inspection before we go out and drive our vehicles. That could be the scope of our audits. So we want to build our plans ahead, and it might be a checklist that we're going to create to help us perform an audit. And that goes right along with our documentation that we'll get into right now. So auditing documents. Here's a list. If it's something that I do regularly and it doesn't change a whole lot, a checklist can be a great thing. Every day before I do my job, I need to make sure that the emergency stop works on this. I need to make sure that I have the appropriate tools and equipment there. And so this is something that could work for a lot of people. And sometimes we'll do an audit on a daily or an inspection on a daily basis where I check off, okay, everything's done before I start this machine. Sometimes it's a framework, and I have this is one that I've used over the years to look at somebody's health and safety programs. And do they have all the policies and procedures that they have in place? Do they have a disciplinary action procedure? Simple questions like that in a framework where we can ask, do you have this? And identify maybe there's a problem or not. And as I was preparing for this presentation, I thought back to some of the audits that I've gone through in my career, and one of those audits, I was working for I don't even know how I'm sure at least a Fortune 100 company, very large corporate environment, and we audited like crazy. We would do audits from one facility to another. We'd of course do internal audits, and then we'd have the people from another facility come in and audit us, and then we would hire third-party auditors to come in and look at our operations. And one audit in particular I was thinking about, they brought in a group. We had 3 auditors show up at our facility, and they were there for 5 days going through just environmental health and safety compliance. And by the time I got done with that, it was exhausting. And I learned stuff from that audit that I never had an idea was even a thing, a requirement, legal requirement or otherwise. But it was a crazy amount of stuff. Am I saying that's what you need to do? No, but I think we need to look at our organizations, determine what is it that we need as we build our plan, what's out there. Other documents would be work orders, corrective actions, and also action registers. These are documents that can help us out. So we talk about documentation, and you've seen this slide before, and you've heard me talk about if it isn't written down, it never happened unless it's bad. The plaintiff attorney can always go out there and recreate things to make us look really bad, but it's very difficult to recreate the good things that we do, and auditing can help us in that. We're going to identify good and bad from that, and there's some risks associated with both sides of that. And so we look at this and say, okay, why do we document our audits? Is it bad to write down when we find a bad thing in our operations? Well, the answer is maybe. It depends on what we're going to do with that audit. And as I was preparing this, I thought, at this point, we have to tell everybody, you got to think really carefully about what you document. If you're going to use this for a valuable purpose, we're going to fix problems, document the heck out of this stuff, because it shows that we're being reasonable and prudent in our operations. If you're just going to do an audit and then not do anything about it, you're better off not doing it. You're better off not writing this stuff down, because it creates a document that can really be damning to us if something should go really bad and the lawyers get involved. Okay, the number one reason why we document audits and have all of these documents go along with it is so things get done. It's a simple thing that if I write something down, the chances of it getting completed go way up. The statistics are easy to show a strong correlation between documenting something and action. If I just go, oh, that's bad, and I don't write it down, chances that I forget it go way up. Okay, so if we know what we're looking for, we'll probably see it, and that's why I say auditing is such a powerful training tool. Inspections are a powerful training tool. If I hand somebody a checklist, and especially if I walk along with that person and show them what to look for, it's a training opportunity that will benefit that person for the rest of their career. It'll benefit our organization for the rest of the time that employee is there. So we ask ourselves, what are the standards that we're looking at? If I'm going to build a checklist, I got to build it from something. And sometimes it's a legal requirement. And so as we've passed out monthly inspection forms for your facilities, some of those are OSHA things. There are things, some of them are fire code. Is the fire extinguisher accessible? Has it been inspected within the last year? Is the gauge in the green and not in the red on the pressure gauge? Something as simple as that is a legal requirement because it's a fire code requirement. Other things are consensus standards. When you go out and do a playground audit or inspection, you're checking that as it compares to an ASTM standard, which is not a legal standard, but the industry has accepted that this is what we do. So Doug and I are going to be sitting through the CPSI course this week, listening to a lot of stuff about ASTM standards because we want to be up to date on what the current standards are as it pertains to playgrounds. So when we go out and do a risk assessment, we're checking that to the current standard. Okay. Sometimes manufacturers have requirements as well. And particularly in the safety world, if we have a specific piece of equipment, especially if it's an oddball thing, and the manufacturer may have some specific requirements that we're expected to keep or meet. And so how do I meet those requirements? Well, I'm going to audit those on a regular basis. That might be part of a startup checklist that says that I have to check the emergency stop switch on this machine every day before I start up. All right. Doug, are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I just got a note here that says they couldn't hear anymore, so I just wanted to make sure that may be something on your end. Doug, could you take care? It's Karen Knopfsinger. Could you just send her a note to look at her audio controls? I want to make sure everybody was still able to hear me. So those manufacturers' requirements can be just as important as a legal requirement. So we ask ourselves, what are some examples of standards? So I had to put a picture of this Boy Scout that went along on a scout trip with me this year, and he caught this fish and he was pretty proud of it. And I had to teach him what the standard was to make his fish look big. And that standard is the closer you hold it to the camera, the bigger the fish looks. Anyway, what are the standards that we're compared to? And it might be something like OSHA has a requirement that you do a personal protective equipment hazard assessment. For every job description out there where I'm going to require some PPE, I've got to have a documented and signed hazard assessment. So my audit might be, do we have that assessment for every job description? Okay? And our finding would be yes or no, or maybe we have them, but they're old or they don't really meet what we're doing. Training records. Have we provided the training for fall protection or hazard communication? And do we have the records for those? That's a pretty easy thing to audit and document whether we've got it or not. We talked about playground. Does it meet the ASTM standards? And some of those can be some of those can be an inch measurement. Is the slippery slide exit within? Oh, I'd have to remember that. See, that's why I'm going back to this refresher. There's a range of inches on the height of a slippery slide exit. So ask ourselves, do the records exist? And one of the big things is, if I have policies and procedures, do we do what we say we do in those policies and procedures? Over the last year, as a significant number of you have had OSHA inspections, many of you have called and said, or emailed and said, hey, have you got a policy for this or a program for this? And we're happy to help out with those and give you a boilerplate for this or that. But the important part is not the policy, but is it something that we are actually doing? You can adopt a policy, but if you don't do what it says in there can be problems there. Either people can get hurt or you have a legal problem. So let's look at that as we audit our policies and procedures. All right. So let's look at some of these Documents that we'll look at, a checklist. So some of these are pretty simple, like a startup or a pre-trip inspection. So if you're a DOT or a CDL operator and you have those DOT requirements, you have to document your pre-trip inspection. If you're a forklift operator, there's a legal requirement to document that. For other operations that we have, we may have an internal startup checklist that we require. And those can be a simple checklist. Check a box, sign your name, we're all good. If there's a deficiency, was it corrected? Okay. All right. How often do we do these audits? Some are daily, that would be like a pre-trip inspection. Some are monthly, an eyewash inspection. Now, technically, those should be for the AST or the ANSI standard. It should be weekly, but if you're doing a monthly inspection on your eyewash station, that'll probably make sure that they're in pretty good shape. Some things are an annual, so I have to go in and look at my respiratory protection program or my hazard communication program or my bloodborne pathogen infection control plan on an annual basis. Okay. Inspections really should be done, audits and inspections should be done by everybody. And we should be looking at everything. Does that mean I do an audit on my office environment? Yeah. Every year we have a number of people that trip and fall because they get their feet caught in wires under their desk. And when they try to stand up, they fall down. And so that could be a simple thing. We do an audit or an inspection on our work areas and make sure they're set up so the chances of trips and falls or other accidents go down. Some of these things need to be done at least monthly. And then there needs to be an accountability for that. How do I make sure that the problems that I identify get fixed? So as I'm out around, I'm going to be looking for unsafe conditions, unsafe acts, remember those things, and then everything else. Then there's the paper compliance things. Are we doing what we say we did? I like to do, when we're talking inspections of our facilities, I like to have a different inspector do those each month. Now that may not make sense in every situation, but I do think that's important because we train everybody in the organization. I like checklists because they're easy, but I also like to have blank lines on a checklist that allow us, so I'm not only just checking X, Y, and Z that are the standards there, but I give the auditor or inspector some leeway to look at other things. We send out this monthly safety audit form as part of our TAP program, and we hand it out as we do visits to you, and we think it's a pretty good form. But does it contain everything that we need? Absolutely not. Your work environment is different than the one that I was working in when I created this, and when I've updated it a few times since. And so make these forms really fit what you're looking at. If there's something that's a constant problem, make sure that's at the top of the list, and that you add that to your work-specific inspections. Here's a reason why we do inspections of our eyewash stations. You see that? Oh, that was nasty. And I've seen this a number of times throughout my career, where either there's a problem where the water is really rusty and nasty, or the water didn't even work. If you've got something corrosive sprayed in your eyes, you don't want to get to this eyewash station and push the paddle and have this type of water or no water come out. So as we do our inspections, let's test things. Make sure it's appropriate to do that. But on these eyewash stations, sometimes there isn't a drain, so put a bucket under the eyewash station or something to capture the water so we don't create a slip hazard as we're doing that. But let's go out and test those. Just recently, I was out doing a risk assessment and found a safety shower that, while it worked, it really didn't meet the ANSI standard where it gives a specific flow rate of water that should come out of there. Okay. All right. This is the accountability portion of the audit. I say have somebody different do the audit each month. and that's great, but we still have to have some accountability. We still have to fix the problems. And that's where having a supervisor or management buy-off is really important in our documentation. Supervisor says, okay, I know this audit has taken place. I've reviewed the problems that have been identified, and I have a plan to fix those, or they've already been corrected. Okay. Here's another example. This would be a playground checklist, and we have all of these available. And I'll send out copies of these with the email when we notify you that the recording is available. One really important thing to do when we are out doing our audits or inspections is we need to correct problems as we see those. So if I see that there is a blocked fire extinguisher, move the materials from in front of the fire extinguisher. Don't just identify a problem. If it's easy to be fixed, let's fix it right there. And if you're doing an audit for a work area that's not yours, one of the great things that you can do is grab the workers that are in that area and bring them over and say, here's something I identified, and here's how it should be as you correct it. So you're training them as you go along. Okay, so fix those as we go and help educate others in what's appropriate. Sometimes we find problems that can't be fixed easily right now. And so what do I do in those situations? Well, a work order system is really helpful. Some of you have electronic systems. Some of you have a paper work order system. I'll send out a copy of this one. We call it a safety maintenance work order. And it's basically a work order that involves safety. So it's a higher priority than just a normal, hey, we've got something that needs to be fixed. And you can rank how important this is. That it's, you look on here, it says IDLH, immediately dangerous to life and health. This needs to be fixed immediately. And this is a great way to track these things to completion. So we started out, and there's some signature lines there. And so once it's complete, it goes through the person completing the repair signs, and the person that started it signs that as well. And if you have safety or risk management people, have them sign off as well that it's completed. Some of you are doing a risk assessment just recently, and they showed me this member showed me their work order system, and it was awesome. Every employee could create a work order off of their phone. It was electronic, and so it was real time, and went directly to the maintenance people. And there was also visibility at all levels of management. So if we had 15 of these that hadn't been completed, management could ask a question and say, what the heck's going on? Why aren't these getting done? And what are we going to do to correct this deficiency? Okay. All right. Tracking it is important. So we talk about a action register. This is a term that I always used when I was working in industry, that we kept a register of the problems that we had. So if there was something off of an audit or an inspection that was an issue that couldn't be corrected immediately, then we would document that and track it on a register, and we would assign that to somebody to handle it. In the trust, we use an electronic means. It's an application that we use as we do a risk assessment. It's called OSHAs 360. And if you have an Apple device, you can go and download that. Just send us an email, and we'll get you access to your facility's information. So you can go in and use this yourself. It's a great way to be able to take a picture and document what it is and track it to completion. That's the most important part of this whole thing. Is fixing the stuff. All right. Other ways that we can do it is to have a monthly report that goes out to management that says that shows where our deficiencies are and how many of those have been completed. Okay. All right. In wrapping up, I want to talk about with some legal issues to think about on this. Like I said before, there can be some challenges if we do audits, we document those, and then we don't do anything about it. It's basically showing a roadmap of the bad things that we've done, and we've identified this forever, and we haven't done anything about it. And so we have to think about that, because many of these documents can be discoverable if you're ever involved in a court case. And like I say, always, I'm not an attorney. You always need to talk to your attorney about this stuff. Some audits and inspection reports can be privileged and confidential, attorney-client privilege, but you've got to go about it the right way. And don't take my word for it. Talk to your attorney. But they need to be directed by an attorney. Needs to be part of a scope of work that attorney has for a legal purpose. How that material is used is important, how it's stored, and all these things come into it. So don't think that just because you stamp it attorney-client privilege and send a copy to your attorney that it's necessarily attorney-client privilege. I just do this out of to be perfectly transparent on this, that I highly recommend that we audit, we inspect, and we document the heck out of this stuff. But at the end of the day, if we're not going to do anything about it, that can get us into some hot water. So make that commitment. We're going to audit, we're going to identify our problems, and we're going to fix those problems. And once they're fixed, we're going to document the heck out of all the good stuff that we did, because it's a two-edged sword. This can be bad for us, but can also be really good. Bad things are going to happen. Things are going to get broken. Things are going to be in unsafe conditions. We're realists in that world, but what we do about it is the important thing. All right. So just in summary, audits are a good thing. They help us identify good things and bad things. Documentation is a good thing. It helps us document the good and the bad. One of the things that we just absolutely have to do is take action. Track these things to completion. Train. Help. If you're taking this task on yourself, you'll probably fail. If you're going to do this as a team, you'll be highly successful. If this becomes a value in your organization, part of your safety culture, you will have a much more successful safety program than you would ever believe, because if everyone is looking, everyone is participating, we're not going to have those problems. Okay? And if you pair this along with other things like an incentive program or other parts of your safety program, incident investigation, your safety committee actively being involved, you can be highly successful. This is a continuous improvement tool. We know when we go out and do a risk assessment that we're going to find problems. We know that we're going to identify some things that may make you feel uncomfortable, and that's not our intention, is to make you feel uncomfortable. It's to help you identify and be better. Continuous improvement should be all of our goals, and audits and inspections and documenting those can be an essential part of that continual improvement. Okay, that's the presentation for today. I have no questions or comments on here, so if you would go ahead and type those in. I'll ask Doug and Brent if they have any thoughts or anything I may have missed or goofed up.
No, I think that was some really good advice, Jason. This is an important process. That's why we, ask for this kind of process as part of our TAP program, because we need to be putting our own eyes on our facilities and our processes and our equipment to make sure that they're safe. It's part of being reasonable and prudent, but it is extremely important that if we're going to check it and identify problems, we have to make sure we address those problems also in a timely manner.
Absolutely.
You can always find something if you're looking for it, so there's always something to learn and improve on. Jason did a great job in covering all of that and in a good, timely manner. Great job.
And I think it's important to note that, the whole purpose of doing a safety check or a safety audit is to find the problems out there, not to, say, hey, we're perfect. When we go through this process and we check all the boxes and saying it's good, 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 really what we've just admitted is that, we didn't find anything that we need to improve. And that's really the purpose, is to make sure that we're improving and finding those trouble areas. So I think a lot of people feel like they need to go through the checklist and just, say everything's good. But I would much rather see problems being identified so that they can be addressed.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Doug. And to be honest with you, some of you are far better than others when it comes to your programs. You're far more mature in the programs, and really, when we go out and do a risk assessment, we may be a lot more nitpicky to those members who have a mature program, and most of those areas most of those members will welcome that. Hey, we want to know this. We want to see. And in a recent risk assessment, I was like, okay, this is not something that I would normally talk about with somebody who's just starting out a safety program, because we don't want to heap it on. But here's something to look at, and they seem to appreciate. Oh yeah, that's something we hadn't looked at before. We thought we had everything tied up here, but here's something else to work on. It's continual improvement. So we have a question: where can we get the audit forms? I will send those out to everybody who signed up for the webinar. Samples there, and that's really what they are, is just samples. I'll send those in their whether it's Excel or Word format, so then you can take those and make them your own. Put your logo on it, change it. If you don't have an eyewash station, you don't have to have that. You don't have to have that line on your audit report. If you have something that we don't have there, add it and just make this document yours. Let's see. So I will send those out, and if you have, and really it'll take IT a little bit of time to get our recording up. So if you have an audit form that you really like, something that works really well for you, send it to me. Especially if you're willing to share that with other trust members out there, and I'll send that out. Do you have suggestions on where to start if we have nothing in place as far as forms, rules, and regulations? Yeah, start with the trust. That might be that would probably be an easy way to start. We also have hundreds of webinar recordings on our website, utahtrust.gov/webinars, and go into the loss prevention area, and there will be things in there on various different regulations. The recent ones that we've done on preparing for an OSHA inspection, those can help out. The documents that we'll send out will be a simple thing, but probably over and above everything is do the TAP program, the Trust Accountability Program. If you take a look at that and put those programs in place, that's the place to really start, because then you have the systems in place that will help you to be successful. And if you've got questions with that, Doug, Brent, myself, that's our job. We're here to help you get better and prevent these accidents and help us all succeed together. Okay, let's see. Looks like those are all the questions. Thanks, folks. I really appreciate you hanging with us today. We know this is not a subject that is really exciting, and it ends up bringing us work, but this is something that will help us be successful. So encourage you to do that. We're here to help out, and if you've been particularly successful in one way, let us know what you've done. Give us your suggestions, forms, and things like that have helped you out, and we'll all succeed together as a trust. Thanks so much, folks. Appreciate it. Have a safe day.